What if the man you buried wasn't really dead? Imagine standing at your husband's funeral, you're heartbreaking, when suddenly your phone buzzes with a message that chills your blood. I'm alive. Don't trust our sons. That's exactly what happened to Linda Monroe, a 66-year-old widow from Maplewood. In that single moment, her entire world turned upside down. Was her husband Richard still alive, or had someone orchestrated a deception darker than she could ever imagine? And more terrifying, why would her own children be mentioned in that cryptic warning? What unfolded next was a journey filled with betrayal, hidden evidence, and a shocking truth that no mother ever wants to face. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll see how love, greed, and justice collided in a way that will leave you speechless. The grey sky hung low over Maplewood Cemetery, a blanket of clouds pressing down, as if even heaven mourned Richard Monroe's passing. I stood at the edge of his casket, my black dress clinging to me in the damp wind, my trembling hands clutching the folded program so tightly that the edges cut into my palms. After 42 years of marriage, I had buried not just my husband, but my partner, my anchor, my entire world. The pastor's words floated past me, something about eternal rest, about God's embrace, but they didn't land. I only heard the hollow thud of dirt falling against wood final and cruel. And then, my phone vibrated. A text message. At a funeral. My funeral. With shaking hands, I pulled it from my purse, expecting some condolence from a distant cousin. But what I saw instead made the blood drain from my face. I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. My breath hitched, my knees nearly buckled. I typed back, my hands clumsy on the screen. Who is this? The reply came instantly, like the sender had been waiting, watching. I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our sons. My heart lurched as I lifted my eyes. Just a few feet away stood Matthew and Kevin, my own sons, dressed in immaculate black suits. Their faces were carved from stone, solemn cold, with just enough imitation of grief to fool the casual observer. But I knew. I saw the hollowness behind their eyes. Tears that didn't come naturally. Hugs that felt more like rehearsed gestures than real love. Was this some cruel prank? Or was my husband, my Richard, really still alive? The memory of our life together came crashing in a storm of images too vivid to ignore. I met Richard when I was just 24, back when Maplewood was still a sleepy town where everybody knew everybody. I worked odd jobs cleaning houses to support my sick mother, while Richard kept his father's small bicycle repair shop alive. We had nothing but patched shoes and hand-me-down coats, but we also had everything that mattered. Love. I still remember that first morning he greeted me, his hands stained with grease, his shy smile lighting up the street. Good morning, Linda. Need me to check out your bike? I didn't own one, but I invented an excuse just to keep talking to him. That moment became stolen walks in Riverside Park, promises under the oak trees, and finally a simple wedding that meant more than any cathedral ceremony ever could. We made a home in a little 2-bedroom house with a tin roof. When it rained, pots and pans caught the leaks, and we laughed about it as though poverty was just another joke to be in on together. When our first son Matthew was born, I thought my heart would burst with joy. Kevin followed 2 years later, and Richard was the father every child deserved. Patient, strong, full of bedtime stories and Sunday fishing trips. But love doesn't always survive ambition. From an early age, Matthew questioned why we lived modestly, why we didn't have a car or a bigger house. Kevin, always in his brother's shadow, echoed every word. When Richard offered Matthew a chance to work at the shop, he sneered. I don't want to get my hands dirty, Dad. I'm going to be someone important. Richard never said how much it stung, but I saw him on the porch at night, staring at the stars with sadness in his eyes. The years carried my boys further from us. They built careers in real estate, wore expensive suits, drove cars that gleamed under the sun. At first I was proud, but pride soured into loneliness as their visits became fewer, their calls shorter, their tone sharper. Whenever they did come, it felt like they were measuring us against their world of glass towers and high-end restaurants. Then came Vanessa Clark Matthews' new wife. I'll never forget her first visit. Red designer dress heels sinking into the dirt of our porch, her smile polite but cutting. She barely touched the dinner I made. And when Matthew whispered that next time we'll take them out to a real restaurant, my heart shattered in ways I couldn't explain. The distance between us grew like a canyon, and Richard knew it. "Money changed them, Linda," he whispered one night as we sat on our porch. "We aren't enough for them anymore." I wanted to deny it, but deep down I knew he was right. And then came the accident. Or at least that's what they told me it was. That morning, I was making Richard's favourite lunch meatloaf and mashed potatoes when the phone rang. "Mrs. Monroe," a voice said, "this is St. Mary's Medical Centre. Your husband has been in a serious accident. You need to come immediately." The world blurred. My neighbour, Carolyn Fisher, had to drive me because I was shaking too hard to even hold the car keys. At the hospital, Matthew and Kevin were already there. How no one had called them yet. But I was too frantic to ask. They said a machine exploded at the shop, that Richard had burns, a traumatic brain injury. When I saw him in the ICU bandaged from head to toe, I barely recognised him. I held his hand, the only part of him not wrapped, and swore I felt a faint squeeze. His lips twitched like he wanted to say something, but the nurses dismissed it as involuntary spasms. 3 days later, they told me he was gone. But now here I was at his grave, phone in hand, staring at words that defied everything I thought I knew. I'm alive. "Don't trust our sons." I shoved the phone into my purse before anyone could see. "Are you okay, Mom?" Matthew asked, his voice dripping with rehearsed concern. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside every nerve in my body screamed that the world was no longer what it seemed. Was Richard still alive somewhere? If so, who was buried in that casket? And most terrifying of all, what role did my own sons play in all of this? Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. Do you think Richard is truly alive, or is someone trying to manipulate Linda? Could Matthew and Kevin really be hiding something this dark from their own mother? If you were in Linda's place, would you confront your sons right away or keep pretending until you learned more? Comment below your thoughts and tell me, where are you watching from? Would you have trusted that mysterious text? The night after Richard's funeral, Maplewood felt like a ghost town. The streets were quiet, the houses dark, but inside my own home I was wide awake, my heart pounding with every tick of the old clock on the wall. The text burned in my mind. "I'm alive. Don't trust our sons." I kept replaying the last weeks, looking for cracks in the story I'd been fed. The explosion at Richard's shop. The way Matthew and Kevin were already at St. Mary's Medical Centre before anyone could have notified them. Their endless talk about insurance costs and early inheritance, none of it added up. At midnight, my phone vibrated again. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Check Richard's desk in the shop. Don't wait." My breath caught. It was the same unknown number. My trembling fingers typed, "Who are you?" The reply came seconds later. Someone Richard trusted. "Go now." Against every instinct, I grabbed a flashlight and my coat. The shop sat at the far edge of Maplewood near the railroad tracks. As I approached, the building loomed in the moonlight. Too still, too clean. An explosion should have left marks, burned walls, scorched floors, shattered glass. But everything looked almost spotless, as if someone had scrubbed away the truth. Inside, dust floated in the beam of my flashlight. Every tool, every machine, every screw sat in perfect order. My stomach twisted. No explosion had ever happened here. I moved toward Richard's old oak desk. My hands shook as I slid open the drawer. At first, just papers, receipts, ledgers, old photographs of our boys when they were still innocent. But then I saw a folded sheet of paper in Richard's handwriting. The note was short, hurried, almost desperate. "Matthew insists I need more insurance. He says it's for Linda. But something feels wrong. I don't trust his intentions." Another note lay underneath. Kevin brought me papers to sign, said they were to modernize the shop. I don't understand them. Why the rush? My knees went weak. Richard had known. He had suspected our own sons were plotting something, and then I found it an envelope with my name on it. My heart pounded as I tore it open. My dearest Linda, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. I've noticed strange changes in Matthew and Kevin. They're obsessed with money, with insurance, with selling our house. Vanessa pressures them constantly. Yesterday, Matthew said I should be more careful because at my age, any accident could be fatal. It sounded less like advice and more like a threat. If I don't survive, promise me you won't trust them blindly. I love you, Richard. The paper slipped from my hands. My husband had predicted his own death, and I had ignored every warning sign. Suddenly, headlights cut across the window. My breath caught. Who else would come here at this hour? A car door slammed, then footsteps. I ducked behind the workbench, heart hammering. The shop door creaked open, and a familiar voice drifted in. Check the drawers, make sure she hasn't found anything. It was Matthew. Another voice replied, lower, sharper. Kevin, relax. Mum's not smart enough to piece this together. She's blinded by grief. I froze, every nerve screaming. They were here checking if I had uncovered their secret. I held my breath as their footsteps grew closer. Kevin yanked open the desk drawer. Looks the same, he muttered. Good, Matthew said. Tomorrow we push harder. The sooner we move her out, the sooner we can collect everything. My blood ran cold. Collect what insurance? The house. My life, as they left their voices, faded, but the terror stayed. I didn't move until their car pulled away. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Go to the police. Ask for Sergeant Paul Jenkins. He knows something doesn't add up. Show him the notes. I didn't hesitate. By noon, I was sitting across from Sergeant Jenkins in Maplewood's small station. His brow furrowed as I told him everything, the texts, the notes my sons, sneaking into the shop. Finally, he pulled a file from his drawer. Mrs. Monroe. This may be hard to hear, he said, but there's no official report of any explosion at Richard's shop. No fire call, no accident report. I blinked, but the hospital said he shook his head. According to Richard's medical intake forms, he wasn't admitted for burns or trauma. He was admitted for suspected poisoning. His blood contained methanol, enough to cause blindness, brain damage, even death. The room spun. Poisoning. Richard hadn't been a victim of an accident. Someone had deliberately poisoned him. My hands gripped the edge of the chair. Why didn't anyone tell me this? Sergeant Jenkins sighed. Your son signed papers requesting confidentiality. They said you were too fragile to handle the technical details. Too fragile? My own flesh and blood had hidden the truth from me. That night, Matthew arrived at my house with a bottle of wine and that practiced smile. Mum, he said smoothly, Vanessa and I have been talking. You shouldn't be alone in that old house. We found a wonderful retirement community with nurses' activities, everything you'll need. And the money I asked keeping my voice even. We'll manage it for you, he replied without hesitation. Invest it wisely, triple it in no time. You'll never have to worry again. His eyes gleamed too brightly. Behind the charm, I saw calculation, greed, maybe even murder. I forced a smile. Let me think about it. But inside fury burned hotter than fear. Hours later, my phone buzzed again. My name is David Whitman. Richard hired me 3 weeks before his death. I'm a private investigator. He was right to suspect Matthew and Kevin. Meet me tomorrow at Cornerstone Cafe back table 3 p.m. I have proof. I set the phone down. My pulse racing. Proof. Finally something solid. But if what this man claimed was true, my sons hadn't just killed their father. They were planning something even darker for me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something besides grief. I felt resolve. Richard had trusted me with his last warning. Now it was my turn to honor him with truth, with justice. The next afternoon, Cornerstone Cafe buzzed with its usual chatter cups, clinking the hum of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine. I sat in the back, my hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea I barely touched. Every shadow felt suspicious. Every doorbell jingle made my pulse spike. At exactly 3 p.m., a tall man with silver at his temples and sharp, steady eyes approached. He carried a worn leather folder tucked under his arm. "Mrs. Monroe?" he asked softly. I nodded. My voice barely worked. "You're David Whitman." "Yes, Richard hired me weeks before his accident." His jaw tightened on the last word. He feared Matthew and Kevin were plotting something. He wanted me to gather proof. I leaned forward, my chest tightening. "Proof?" He opened the folder, laying out audio recordings, photographs, and financial documents. "Listen." He pressed play on a recorder. Richard's familiar voice filled the cafe. "David, if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Matthew keeps pressuring me about life insurance. Kevin's been asking strange questions about my routine. I don't trust them." My eyes burned. Hearing Richard's voice again was like a knife in my heart. But then another recording played, this time Matthew's voice. "We can't wait much longer. I've already bought the methanol. Once Dad drinks it, everyone will think it's a stroke. And Mum, she'll be so broken she won't fight us. We'll control everything." Gasps caught in my throat. Then Kevin's voice followed on another tape. "After Dad, we'll deal with Mom. Make it look like suicide. She's depressed, fragile. No one will question it." I covered my mouth to keep from crying out. My own sons. The babies I once rocked to sleep planned to murder me for money. David's eyes softened. "I know this is unbearable, but it's enough to put them away. We'll go to Sergeant Jenkins tonight. With this, they can't escape justice." I swallowed hard, wiped my tears, and nodded. "Then we go tonight." Hours later, under the sterile lights of Maplewoods Police Station, I laid everything on the table: Richard's notes, David's evidence, the recordings. Sergeant Jenkins listened in stunned silence. When it was done, he looked at me with quiet resolve. "Mrs. Monroe, tomorrow morning we'll take them in. Both your sons will be arrested for first-degree murder." And that's exactly what happened. At dawn, patrol cars rolled down Maplewood's quiet streets. Matthew tried to talk his way out, denying everything until the recordings played in the interrogation room. Kevin attempted to run, but was caught within blocks. Both were charged with murder, conspiracy, and fraud. The trial drew crowds from neighboring towns. I sat in that courtroom, a black dress wrapped around my aging frame, my back straight, with the strength Richard had left me. The prosecutor's case was airtight. The jury gasped when they heard Matthew and Kevin's cold voices planning not only their father's death, but mine. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Rest now, Richard. Justice is here." The judge sentenced them to life in prison. They were no longer my sons in that moment. They were strangers who chose greed over love. But this is not where my story ends in tragedy. In the months that followed, I used the insurance money not for myself, but to start something good. The Richard Monroe Foundation for Families of Betrayal and Violence. With David's help, we provided legal aid investigators and counseling for people who faced the same unthinkable betrayal I had endured. Out of Richard's death, something healing was born. Today, years later, Maplewood knows me not as a grieving widow, but as someone who turned pain into purpose. My husband's workshop is now a garden filled with roses, tulips, and sunflowers. Every Sunday, I cut fresh flowers to take to his grave. I speak to him, tell him about the lives saved, the families protected, the justice carried forward in his name. Do I miss my sons? I miss the children they once were, yes. But the men they became, they died to me long before prison bars closed around them. What lives in my heart now is Richard's love, my strength, and the families I've been able to help. Because in the end, love is not about blood. Love is about loyalty, about choosing to protect, not destroy. That's the legacy Richard left me, and it's the one I will pass on. As the sun sets each evening, golden light spilling across the garden, Richard never got to see, I feel his presence in the breeze. A whisper that says, "You did right, Linda. You honored the truth." And finally, for the first time in years, I sleep in peace. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. What do you think of Linda's story? Did the ending give you hope, or did it leave you heartbroken? If you felt the emotions, comment 100 down below to let me know. Tell me, what country are you watching from? And if you believe more people should hear this story of love, betrayal and justice, share this video with your friends so they can feel it too.